Welcome back. Once again, we are discussing this book called Conversations on Love, in which the author Natasha Lunn she discusses the ideas of love with different writers, experts, psychologists, and helps us develop an understanding of love. In this third and the final episode of this series, I'm going to focus on two different conversations that she has, and these are really important ones in long term relationships. Two things happen when you get into long term relationships. One, they work out well, but at some point, you feel the need to, rather, a challenge to sustain love in the long terms. And even though things are good between you two, but you would want to find new ways to sustain love and carry on with that relationship. The other possibility could be that you don't want to continue and you part your ways. So, how do we go about these two different scenarios? So, the first conversation is about redefining love or romance in such long term relationships, in which the author Natasha she has a conversation with Roxane Gay, who is an American writer. So now I'm going to read this conversation for you, and you'll get to know um, what are the opinions of Roxanne on this subject. And I'm sure you'll get to learn a lot of interesting things here. So, first of all, Natasha asks her, what are really the differences between the idea of love um, you had when you were younger and how that changed when you really understood the idea of love at a deeper level when you are older now? To this, Roxanne answers by saying the following words. She says, the main difference is that I understand a lot of the mythology around love is just that it's mythology. Growing up, I read and watched a lot of romantic comedies and dramas which generally give you a grand sense of love and romance, not necessarily a realistic one. Now, rather than that instantaneous flash of new love we often see in stories, I'm more interested in the love that deepens over time. Everybody's relationship to love is different. Sometimes it is great, sometimes it is not. New love is always exciting. But what happens after the newness of a relationship fades or dims is more beautiful to me. It's something that grows where there is patience and humor, where you can be furious with someone and still love them. I appreciate that now, especially because I'm older and I'm in a functional relationship. It has certainly shown me that you can have a spark and excitement and romance with someone who's also going to be there in the morning when you haven't brushed your teeth. Now I find joy in loving my partner as much as I enjoy being loved by her. And I don't think we talk enough about what it means to be truly loved and to be able to reciprocate that. So that's her response, and it kind of reminds me of a quote that you might have also heard, I think. It says that you fall in love with a person twice. Once when you meet them initially and you don't know anything about them, and the second time when you have learned almost everything about them at a much later stage in relationship. Then you rediscover a deeper sense of love. So, this is what she is talking about, that if you want to get into a long term relationship, if you want that deeper sense of love, you need to be ready for that. You need to be patient, and you need to go through different phases of relationship, and eventually you will discover that there is profound beauty in love. But of course, all these patience and all this hard work, it's only worth it when you think you have found the right person and you're sure about it, that you want to invest in that relationship. And when you invest in that, you reap the rewards also much later. So you have to be ready for that. And then Natasha asks about the challenges to sustain long term love, and what are some of those big challenges. To this, Roxane answers. She says, the biggest challenge is recognizing that new isn't always better. Often people get distracted and think, oh, look at that sexy person, I want that. Or this person intrigues me intellectually. Instead of thinking they could be a good friend, they consider having a fling with them, because people tend to be more interested in the new than the steady. But I have learned you can absolutely find newness in an older relationship too, if you are open to it. And frankly, that's one of the most exciting things about being in love. I don't want to get to know someone new. I will tell you that for sure. I'm old and I'm done. I've had it with trying to figure out someone's new quirks. I want the quirks I already know. So that's kind of funny. She's saying it's more about that age, she feels more settled. But I think that also goes for a lot of other people who are still young and they want stable and healthy relationships. To understand the beauty of long term relationships and how rewarding they can be. And as she said, when you find somebody else attractive, uh, just assuming that having a fling with them is going to help your cause or going to make your life interesting doesn't always happen. It can add to more troubles, more burdens, more baggages. So you have to pick your path carefully. But then the question is still the idea of romance. If you are a romantic and if you want to sustain romance in a long term relationship, how do you do that? And to that, Roxane answers. She says, being a romantic is a help as long as there is true love beneath it. It cannot be just romance for the sake of romance. I love doing romantic things for and with my partner, and every day she does something romantic like leaving little post it notes with messages and hearts on everywhere. One day they are in my suitcase, another day they are in my toothbrush drawer. Those sweet words are always a surprise. Often we think romance has to be a room full of roses, but sometimes it's a post it note. Sometimes it's picking your partner up from work and taking them to a special place to relax. Sometimes it's taking out the trash before they got home. Romance is about finding ways to show someone they are appreciated. Perhaps I'm romantic because I don't like being taken for granted, and so I don't want someone I'm with to feel that way either. Inevitably, at some point in the course of a relationship, one of you will take the other for granted. That is just the way it goes. But when that happens, I want it to be an aberration and not the norm. So, a couple of things. One is the line that I really liked. It says, romance is about finding ways to show someone they are appreciated. You just appreciate them. You're grateful them. And you can do that in different ways. And all of that is romantic. The second thing is, of course, there will be things that will go wrong, but you have to come back and make romantic gestures the norm. That's all. That's all you have to do. Just make little bit of efforts every day. Small things, small appreciation, that goes a long way. That's the lesson here. And now let's go to the other side of the discussion. What happens when it doesn't work out? How do you deal with the grief? And for that, Natasha has conversation with the British novelist Justine Picardie. So the first question is straight away about grieving for the end of a marriage. What does it feel like? That's what she asks. And to this, Justine Picardie, the novelist, she answers. She says, divorce can feel like a bereavement that turns your future hopes to ashes and casts a dark shadow over the past. In my case, it was the end of an incredibly important relationship because my ex husband was and still remains the father of our sons. When he left me and our 20-year marriage ended, I felt as if I was trying to navigate a path through a wasteland of shock and grief. It was like an immense bomb had exploded, destroying the landscape of our family life. But I managed to find my way through that challenging territory partly because I had done it before when Ruth died of breast cancer at the age of 33. In the immediate aftermath of her death, all I could think about was the horror of it, the physicality of her suffering, and everything she endured for the last 10 months of her life. But I also knew that I couldn't be completely submerged in that visceral pain because I had two small children to look after. In a similar way, I understood that I simply couldn't go under after the end of my first marriage. I could not get lost in that wasteland, even though I had been in the relationship for most of my adult life. When a relationship ends, people say, you'll get over it. Those are the 4 most unhelpful words you can say to anybody who's feeling heartbroken. Because whether it's a death or the end of a marriage, the loss is not a mountain you climb or you come down on the other side of it. You never entirely get over it, but you do rise to the challenge until eventually you live with the loss and it becomes part of you. I feel that way about my husband, ex-husband rather. Although the ending was extremely painful, by the time we divorced, we had established a cordial relationship because I loved our sons far more than I was angry with him. I didn't want to go war with him or undermine our shared past. Also, having survived Ruth's death, I knew that I would survive my divorce too, and that I couldn't spend the rest of my life being unhappy. So, 2 different stories of her life that talk about the tragedy here. One is when she lost her partner, Ruth, who died of cancer, and then the divorce. And both were hurtful, but she says that you have to accept it, you have to live with it. And that's the only way to go about it. Things don't get perfect, you don't get over them completely. That's all. One correction, Ruth was her sister, so who died, and then she um, had divorced with her ex-husband. So these two relationships, I got confused. First relationship was with her sister who died, and second was with the husband who got divorced. So these are two different kinds of love we are speaking about here. One is for a sibling, and the other is more romantic kind of love in marriage. So then Natasha asks about the end of the marriage and what kind of loss does it feel like? To which Justine replies, she says, I think that many of us understand the experience of relationships that have ended and yet continue in our thoughts because we carry on thinking, remember when, or I wonder if. The past, present, and future are in a constant state of flux. I'll remember a former relationship or experience, and quite naturally, my thoughts will turn to a particular person and what I might say to them were I ever to see them again. We think of our lives as linear, but they are not. Although one day follows the other, we are just as likely to be recalling what happened last week as musing on the events a decade ago, or indeed our hopes for next year. And I feel the same way about the loss of my sister too. The past and the present and the future are threaded together. And then they have this conversation about what happened in her case about after the divorce. And initially it was difficult, but then she says that her husband met somebody else, fallen in love with her, and she also met somebody and fell in love. So that was the question, that how is falling in love after divorce, and how is it different from being in love for the first time? To which Justine responds with, she says, it's so precious when you find love in later life, whether you are in your 40s or 50s or older. I think people have a great capacity to fall in love again, even after immense loss. That to me is the real miracle. Falling in love for the second time can feel reckless, but it's also a great act of courage. I felt blessed to have met Philip, and I had the faith to embrace our relationship. Perhaps this has something to do with what I had learned from my sister's death. You cannot live your life fearing what lies around the corner. Also, when I fell in love for the second time, I was in my 40s. What I wanted from love was very different to what I was looking for in my 20s. My ex husband was a musician, which sounds romantic and glamorous, but it was tough, having two small children while he was often away on tour for months on end. Whereas when I fell in love for the second time, it was with someone who is very present. As soon as we met, I felt I could talk to Philip about everything. I talked to him about Ruth very early in our relationship. Some people find it hard to talk about death, but there was no embarrassment or fear on Philip's part. Ruth's death is integral to who I am, and he's able to accept that. So that's the kind of happy ending that we find here. That even if something or the other goes wrong, there will be grieving period, there will be a sense of loss, there will be certain emotions or certain feelings that will never go away. You'll always feel that missing part still remains missing. But you'll find much more precious things in life, precious forms of love, and it will go on. That's the learning here. And these are not the only learnings, these are just a few conversations I've picked from the book. And if you want to get into the depth of it, if you want to understand more conversations on love, you have to pick the book. And I'm sure you'll enjoy that. Thank you very much. I'll come back with a new book, and I hope we'll have a really, really good time when we explore the next book as well. Thank you so much for listening. Stay connected, keep following. Thank you.